going to get on this page, we're going to get to Lori, and more so Lori, the article Lori wrote, keep KPI. I specifically focus on the business ones. And business performance KPIs are key for product lifecycle management. These are the focused around customers, customer lifecycle value, bookings, revenues, costs, and profitability. For executives, these should drive investment decisions, lay foundation for additional headcount, have go, no-go decisions at the product level. Laura, I've got the list of things down here, plus before. I'd love to have you sort of talk broadly about this before, your 150, whatever KPIs and how you got to, at least these business ones. And our responses sort of were more the ones aligned to life cycle. So let's get your take.
Yeah. So, when I think about life cycle, of course, I go to the curve, right? Where you've got a lot of investment up front here along this side, and it takes a while to get momentum. You get the momentum, and then there's always that sort of drop and you have to adjust, right? So if this is a model we're sort of looking at from the product life cycle perspective, then I think the KPIs change depending on where you are in that life cycle. And you need to sort of look at.
Did you read ahead into my questions, Lori?
No.
Did you read ahead into my questions? Okay. It happens every week with somebody. They actually start talking about one of the future questions.
Where are you going next? Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, but you've got. I know you've got to leave early, so let's get your take.
Yeah. So my take is that I think every business is going to focus on different KPIs, and you have to have an agreement about, at the board, executive level, the CX level, as to what is important for the strategy of that company. So there's going to be no hard and fast rule as to which are the ones that you're going to be reporting on. Obviously, revenues is one, margins are another. That's standard across the board. But when you start drilling down to the operational work of the product team and how you're managing the team and what you're going to measuring them on and what you're setting their expectations for, I think that changes based on where you are in the life cycle. And you have to always look back at what should you be monitoring based on the strategy and the goals of the company. Just throwing that out.
No, I think it's key. And the question we'll get to later is what aspects of product management. So it's a little different than the KPIs. Let's go through. And I used in the poll question, inception, growth, and I actually break up growth into early hyper growth, late stable growth, maturity, and then decline. Talk to me about inception or product market fit. What would be a good KPI there?
Yeah, again, goes back to the strategy, right? From a product market fit perspective, you really need to be measuring opportunity against addressable market, against whether this is, a revenue or a customer acquisition scenario. Because as you said, often you do that giveaway thing because of the synergy revenues that you're going to get from other products by adding a feature or function or capability that drives revenues, across the street. There's no hard answer. There really is not a hard answer.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the most valuable KPIs. You listed revenue, bookings, funnel, retention, attrition, customer lifecycle value, velocity / time to revenue, gross margins, net promoter and customer satisfaction. Which one do you think is the most used and which one do you think is the most underused?
I think, obviously revenue and margins are sort of the industry standard across, I think, all industries. But my background's in telco and cyber. So I also lean to the whole CLV scenario, the recurring revenue, which then turns into sort of the bookings and funnel analysis.
Yeah.
Retention goes to attrition and CLV, so they're very much tied together. You can mix those numbers around and come up with the same kind of analysis. NPS and customer satisfaction to me is very fluffy. It's always subjective and not objective. So while I know a lot of industries depend on those numbers, it's not something that as a PM I would depend upon. Of course, I'm going to be dealing with ticket management and the quality of the product, but from a much more objective than subjective perspective.
I think that NPS is something that's gotten so out of whack because people now manage to it, right?
And
if
it's
I
not
don't, 9 and 10 means you had a great service. So give me a 9 or 10. I know, and I'm probably more
Well,
automotive.
I think a lot of these as a metric get lost. NPS and customer satisfaction as a number, it's interesting. NPS and customer satisfaction as a process within an organization to drive customer service and to drive change management is, those companies that have best practice around this actually integrate this into their business process. When I was at Pitney, we had customer sat, we used NPS, but we also had customer sat that went out after every sale that was made, and that data would come back in and root itself. And it was on my strategic architecture, and it was part of my bonus. And guess what? Being the coin-operated little guy that I am, if it was on my bonus and something came back that was negative, it funny how that found its way on the top of my to-do list for my team.
Sure.
So, it's like everything else. I was listening to Lori, and I was thinking, a lot of the things that we do, when you look at like market sizing and TAM, SAM, and SOM, when you talk about SOM might be a number, but it's also a capacity limitation that needs to be worked on. Yeah. And we look at metrics as just numbers, and metrics tell a story. And I don't think a lot of organizations want to actually understand the numbers in a way to tell us that the story is laying out in order to make change within the organization.
Yeah. I think the other one that may start cropping into this group would also be compliance, related to regulatory, security, privacy. I'm a cyber gal, so I'm very focused on making sure that both the environment and the data is properly managed to compliance levels that are required in whatever industry you're in.
No, I think that's a key for any product to understand those types of things. Steve, do you have any thoughts on these metrics?
I'm looking at a lot of these, again, thinking toward things like market product fit or market problem fit. And one in particular that I've always been quite fascinated by is really doing funnel metrics. You get 1,000 people in the funnel, and by the time they get to the demo, it's whittled down to 10 people or something, and you just go, where's the flaw? I mean, what happened here?
Conversion rates.
And so the conversion rates tell you things that are really insightful. It's like you promised more than you delivered, or your promise isn't a very good one. When 80% of the people who download it use it and love it, then we've got a top of funnel problem. With, if people download it and never use it again, we have a bottom of the funnel problem. And I think I've always been fascinated by looking at conversion rates, in particular as it relates to, have we actually got the right product, or we have the right product, but we're just not talking about it right.
Steve, long ago, I shared with you a model I used to use. It was a 4-blocker. Mine was there's some things are market, some things are product, some things are strategy, some things are execution. And so that had 4 blocks: market strategy, who has the problem, what's the segmentation, product strategy, that's your concept of how you're going to solve that, address that problem. Product execution is translating that concept into a product, and market execution is then the actual marketing and selling of it. And what I would tell people is, you tell me where the hole in your funnel is. If your lead if your reach and lead conversion on a marketing campaign is really bad, you've got a market strategy problem. You don't understand the segment, and you don't understand their problem. So you hit people. You said how you could help them, and nobody was interested because your market strategy was bad. That being said, if you get good conversion there and it moves to the first call, and the first call we get a chance to tell them how we're going to help them. Concept, right? Here's how we would help you. If you lose a lot, if their hole is there, it's a product strategy problem. They self-identified they have the problem, but then when we told them how we're going to help them, like, right? You move past that to a demo or a trial. If they get a demo or a trial and then they fall off, you've got a product execution problem. You told me how you're going to help me, and I thought, oh, well, I'm interested. Then you showed me, and I'm like, right? Then you move down to sales or market execution, which is more about pricing and sales and that type of stuff. But it's a strategic way to look at that. And it makes sense for thinking about that in a product lifecycle because it helps you understand where those holes are.
Yeah,
I've got
absolutely.
one last question here, and this is a leading question for me. How important is doing a trailing 12 month or something that's a over time, over periods versus recent period?
Well, I think it's important. I mean, we use pressure curves here.
Okay.
And so, because pressure curves actually have they can spot structural changes. So it's a trailing 12 over a trailing 3. And you can actually start to see the structural change in the market because you'll get if the 12 is going up and the 3 is going up faster than the 12, it's going to start to pull the market up, and you can start to see things happening. And that just comes from my investment days as well. So it's the same methodology I use for my portfolio. But I think it's really important, especially in a business like ours where conversion might be 8 months. We'll get the sale, and then we don't have revenue for 8 months on that sale because conversion takes so long. So it's really important to see those trends.
Lori,
Yeah, I'm a trend guy too. It's like your speedometer is irrelevant, right? Except you shouldn't be exceeding the speed limit. But when you add your odometer and your speedometer, now you're on something relevant. We now have a trend that says you're averaging, this many miles per hour. And so now you can start doing math. But if you just say, hey, I am currently going 72 miles an hour, you can't extrapolate that. I mean, that doesn't, I'm even taking into account being pulled over for speeding, but you can't sustain that 72. So you've got to have it over time, an average over time.
Lori, your thoughts before we move forward?
Yeah, I'm trying to balance my product management versus my sales hat here. Because time to market, but then the revenue that is sort of that sales responsibility. I think from a product management perspective, there's going to be different aspects you need to focus on because the time to revenue also has a lot of marketing aspects that are not necessarily the responsibility of product management per se.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a crossover there. So what can you, as a product management lead, what can you control versus as an overall business lead? So time to market sort of says, that's when are you getting it into the market? So what's the development cycle versus converting the sales funnel or closing those deals and onboarding, which is a different function, I think.
Which goes back to the different phases of where you are in a product lifecycle, what different metrics to be going forward with.
Yeah.
So awesome.